I want you guys to think about the last time you planned out a project or a trip or something complicated and it didn't go exactly according to your plan. It was pretty rough, right? How did you feel when that happened? Did you feel upset, neglected, or rejected? Well, I want to tell you a story about one time I got rejected. When I graduated design school, I had this big plan. I wanted to work for one of the top branding agencies in New York City. I had this whole plan figured out in my head. I was going to get the internship in New York City. I was going to get hired as a designer, and I was going to transfer to their Barcelona office. And I was going to live my dream as a successful designer in Barcelona and learn Spanish and Catalan and all the good things. It's also the skateboarding capital of the world. I don't know if you knew that. So I applied for this internship. I wasn't sure if I was going to get it. I was pretty underqualified. But luckily, I got the interview. So I headed into New York City, one of the tallest buildings in the city, and on the elevator ride, I could feel my anxiety just building up with every floor as I got closer and closer to this interview. And actually, it went pretty well. I did all the things that I had to do that they say you should do in interviews. Wear a nice outfit, be yourself, get some shiny shoes. But there was one question that this interviewer asked me that I was really stumped. And she asked me, where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? And I thought in my head, well, not here. Yeah. But really, I had to think about this one. I hadn't thought about where I wanted to be in 5 to 10 years. I had no idea what was going to happen, because sometimes you just never know what life's going to throw at you. But I thought about it, and I had to answer the question. Otherwise, I would look unprepared. So I said, the skateboarding industry? And she looked at me and said, why are you here then? Clearly, I didn't actually want this job. And I realized later that maybe I was trying to live out someone else's version of what being a successful graphic designer really is. And it wasn't my version of success. So I got rejected, and it stung real hard. I did not expect to get rejected. I didn't plan for getting rejected. But the thing is, reality stings sometimes, but it's not poisonous. It doesn't kill you. Think about Thomas Edison trying to invent the light bulb. He went through thousands of iterations, and he wasn't succeeding. Every single one, people were saying, Edison, you're stupid for trying to do this impossible thing. We take for granted these lights, right? But eventually, he had this attitude of curiosity, experimentation, and persistence that finally led him to getting this project done. So after that bad interview, I realized I wasn't meant to work there at all, and I was trying to figure out what the next season of my life would hold. And that's what this talk's going to be about. It's about seasons, mostly of career. I'm only 28 years old, so I don't have a ton of life advice for you guys, but I'll do my best to capture the things that I wish I knew when I was getting started and I was applying for these jobs, getting my design career started. When we think of seasons, this is what we normally think about. Winter, flowing into spring, summer, fall, and back again. 3 months each, with a natural flow, this transition. But some days, it's not actually like that. Maybe it's the middle of April. I'm from New York, so you get these snowy days, and you think it's going to be beautiful outside, and you end up being that guy in shorts in the snow. There's always that one guy, right? What's up with that? But this more abstract idea of winter is what I want to talk about. There's all different kinds of winters. There's creative winters where you feel burnt out. There's financial winters when you lose a bunch of money and you're broke. There's social winters where you lose friends and break relationships. And there's even personal winters where you feel totally lost and you lose sight of who you really are. And sometimes those winters can last a long time. And you just feel frozen. And so how do we avoid that? What happens when we get stuck in this winter season? Simply put, when you get stuck in these winter seasons, you and your gift will not show up in the world. I'm looking around this room, and some of the people I've talked to today, you're all so interesting, and you have so much passion and potential, but when the world doesn't get to have these gifts, you're being selfish, and you know that it's in your control to snap yourself out of these seasons. We all go through these difficult seasons, but I hope this talk is a series of reminders that will help you get through them a little quicker. On the other side, we have summer, which, in my opinion, is my favorite season, where everything just seems to be flowing. It feels like everything's really natural and fun. You're just cruising. You're riding the wave, right? But even in these seasons, we sometimes forget to celebrate the small wins and the victories. So how do you celebrate these wins? For me, that actually is going skateboarding. I've been skateboarding for 15 years or so, and I still do it, even though I've had my fair share of injuries. I'll tell you about that a little later. And then on a larger scale, I like to travel. I travel for work sometimes, but whenever I have a really successful project, I like to just buy a plane ticket for fun, go on vacation, or even just a day trip to somewhere else. These are a few of the places that I'm hoping to go in the next few years. When you're in that winter season, it can be tempting to just want to skip through all the work and the bad part and just go straight to summer, right? We obviously know that is not how it works. That's what we call an overnight success, and it's not real. Or we just want to ride this endless summer from one success to the next, to the next. But I read in this book called The Daily Stoic that endless pleasure is its own form of punishment. And we look at these celebrities that are so successful and they have it all, but they're still unhappy. So maybe this isn't the answer either. Let me stop there and introduce myself a little bit. My name's Eric Friedensen. A lot of people know me as F. Dot. My last name's pretty long and hard to pronounce, so I made it easy for you. I create art experiences that bring people together and spread curiosity. Here's a little peek into my universe. This is me in my art studio. When I was making these pieces that you see in this photo, I was having so much fun and I felt that flow, but it wasn't always like this. When I got my start in the professional world of graphic design and art, I was making a lot of hand lettering. This was one of my first pieces that I really was determined to finish. And this wasn't very good. This sucked, right? This is not something that you'd want to put on your tote bag. But I didn't let that discourage me. I still put it out there into the world, hoping that someone would appreciate it. But actually, this is what it sometimes feels like when you put your art out into the world. My favorite part is the guy in the red outfit just walking by. He's clearly not going to stop and help. That's actually my friend Brian doing the 360 flip. But something that I was so focused on was what other people thought of my artwork, something that I couldn't really control. My dad gave me this piece of advice to not worry about what you can't control. Only focus on the things that you can actually chip away at over time. So that was my plan, to focus on my lettering skills and go from being this bad artist to being this famous or successful artist, whatever that means. And this piece, can you guess how long it took me? This piece took me 4 weeks to finish. How am I going to make a living if it takes me 4 weeks to finish one piece? That's impossible. So I really needed to speed up my process and keep working at this. I really enjoyed it, so I just kept going and experimenting with different styles, different phrases, and I would use lettering as a way to have my own voice and attract attention to my mantras that I was telling myself every day. I started getting better and better and actually getting my art featured on some blogs and other online accounts that share lettering. And that was really validating for me, that someone actually cared about my art enough to share it with their audience. Eventually, I started getting some requests for freelance projects. These were some of my early client projects. I even got to work with this guy named Pat, and he had this company called Flindustries. I don't know, it sounded kind of sketchy to me, but the project ended up being pretty good, and he paid me on time, which was nice. Thank you, Pat. I really felt like I was living the dream. I was living in Manhattan. I had freelance work coming in, pretty steady. Actually, I'm just kidding. I was getting most of my clients from Craigslist. But I was pretty desperate at that time. But in my head, I felt like I was living my dream. I was starting to get closer. And it's nice when you start to see a little bit of progress in your work, right? One day, I was painting a sign for my friend's tattoo shop. Just in my apartment, I had my little table set up. And I just smelled something weird. And I thought, it's just one of those New York City smells. No big deal. So I closed my window. Then the smell got stronger and stronger. And I was like, what is that? It smells like smoke. So I went back to my window, and I looked down. I was on the second floor, and the entire backyard was going up in flames. It was one of those little enclosed alleyways where the restaurants put all their cardboard boxes and garbage, and it was just going up. And I could see it very clearly, so I closed all the windows. I ended up actually burning my hands on the windowsill. Seconds later, the windows blew into the apartment, one after the other, and I went straight into panic mode. I didn't have anything in my pockets besides my phone. I didn't even have any shoes on. I didn't even have my hat, and I wear my hat every single day. I ran out the front door as fast as I could, leaving my cat behind. I couldn't find her, and I didn't know what to do. Don't blame me, come on. It was scary. So I ran, and finally the fire department came, put out the fire. They said, it's okay, it's just gonna be smoke damage, don't worry, but they were wrong. I got to go back into the building later that day. Luckily, the whole thing didn't collapse, but what I saw in that apartment was the most scarring image that I ever seen. Everything was black. The ceiling was on the floor. My mattress was just a small chunk of foam on the box spring. All of my wardrobe, I was living with a girl at the time, we lost pretty much everything we owned in the span of 2 hours. One of the things I managed to find was my scanner, where I was using for scanning in my sketches, and even though it was melted shut, I was able to pry it open and find a sketch that I was working on earlier in that week, and it said optimist. Now, I could have chose to just see this as just another sketch. It was all wet from the water damage, and I could have just thrown it away. But when I saw it, it brought me back to what I was thinking when I was creating it. And I remembered that I actually am an optimist. I can get through difficult things like this. And luckily, I did have renter's insurance on my apartment. If you don't have renter's insurance, go get that today, please, because it saved my butt. We only got a few $1,000s from it to share, and it wasn't really enough. My brother decided to create a fundraising campaign for us, which, thanks to a few generous people, we bet the goal within 2 days. And we were back on our feet pretty quickly. So we were very lucky throughout this whole experience. But I knew that I had to share this story with people. So my first step was to finish this lettering piece and create something that I could give to people who supported us after the fire. So I created these letterpress cards, and I mailed them out one by one, hand addressing these and sending them out. Even people who didn't know about the fire wanted these, so I started making more and more of these cards. I sent out hundreds of these things all over the world. A year after the fire, we made a video about the story, and after that video went out, I was getting these emails from strangers sharing their stories of adversity and telling me that my story had inspired them. I never thought that my lettering could be that powerful before. Now imagine if I hadn't actually turned this into any project, if I just decided to be a victim of the fire and never turned it into something beautiful and creative. I kept exploring this optimist project, making apparel, and then eventually creating this chalkboard mural. In 2016, when we had the last election, I felt like the world could use a little extra optimism. So I decided to clear out my apartment and have an art show where I invited my friends from around the world to submit black and white pieces of art, just demonstrating what optimism meant to them. It was a really beautiful experience, and the conversations that I had that night I'll never forget. And through this whole experience, I took away this idea of gratitude. I know it sounds cheesy, but the most important and true things are cheesy and cliche. And that's why they're cliche, is because they're scientifically true. When you're more grateful, you end up enjoying your work more. And when you enjoy your work more, you get your gift out into the world and it impacts people. And then they can go on to do the same. Through losing everything that I owned, I actually realized how much I still had. I still had my health, I had my talent, I had my family, my friends. We even found my cat Pocket after the fire. She had jumped out the window. It was incredible. And another silver lining from this experience is I was able to kind of redesign my life from scratch. I was given a blank slate, and I didn't have to replace everything that I had lost. Maybe I didn't need all that junk that I had collected over the years. I also didn't have to live in Manhattan anymore. Maybe that was part of my own version of what I thought success needed to be, spending thousands and thousands of dollars every month on rent. That's not my version of success. It was cool to do it, but after that, I said, I want to move to a more sustainable place, and I was able to really choose intentionally what I wanted my daily life to look like. So coming out of that really difficult season of kind of reinventing myself as an artist through this project, I learned so much. And one of the things I learned was that this natural flow, when you start to embrace it, it makes every day a little bit easier. So be grateful for the season that we're in. even if it's not exactly what was planned. Focus on the things you can control and don't worry too much about the rest. Sounds simple, right? Because that's going to lead you on to the next one. At this time, I needed to go back from freelance life to working a day job to get some more money in my bank account to live in New York if I wanted to stay there. Didn't really feel like moving into my parents' basement. So I got a job at this agency called MKG. They had a chalkboard wall, like a neglected black wall in the corner. No one was using it, so naturally I said to myself, well, why isn't my art there? And I stayed after hours one night, invited a friend in, and we did a little collaboration. And then people liked it so much that we did it again a month later. And every month I was having this rotating collaboration mural with chalk. I had so much fun with this, but the problem was it was very temporary. The chalk would get erased, and all that was left were the photos. I had this craving to get my art out into the world in more of a permanent way. So naturally, I decided, well, let's paint some murals out in the world. Only one problem, I didn't have permission to paint murals, and I didn't want to go to jail as a graffiti artist. So I used the magic of Photoshop and mocked up this mural. This is right around the corner from the office. I thought this was the perfect wall for a mural. With that fire escape, it just feels so New York. Ended up being my most popular post from that whole year on Instagram. And so I said, why don't I actually try to get this mural done? Why don't I take this to the store and say, hey, this post is getting a lot of traction. I think it would bring a lot of customers to your restaurant. Let's make it happen. And they said, no, sorry, it's a landmarked building. We can't do that. We'll get in trouble. So I kind of just gave up on it. I did a few more mock-ups of other walls. A couple years later, though, I got an email from their marketing team saying that they found my mock-up of this mural on Pinterest and that they wanted to make it real that weekend. I was out of town, so I had to call in a favor from a friend, but that mural actually ended up being there. And it's in Union Square in Manhattan, right in the middle of the city. I had never even dreamed of getting my art in that place, on that platform. So the lesson I learned from this was to make for the job that you want, not the job that you have. Because imagine if I hadn't put anything out there, these dream projects. If I can mock it up in Photoshop, why not just do it and put it out there? You never know what's going to work out. The more seeds that you plant in this season, the more growth you'll have in the next. The next story I want to share with you is about falling down. I know these stories are kind of depressing, right? But there's a point to them. I'm not trying to just get your pity about, oh no, look, my apartment burned down. But there's a point to these. So actually, I don't want to talk too much about falling down because that's a part of life. Getting back up is where the living happens. That's where you learn the most. That's how you act in these situations after you're faced with adversity is really who you are and who you can be. I told you I've been skateboarding for a while. It's been about 15 years. The thing about skateboarding and all extreme sports is that they're pretty extreme. And it's a high risk for a pretty low reward, in most people's opinion. I think it's a high reward. But sometimes you take a slam and it's pretty hard on your body. Check out that Wu-Tang Clan mural in the back, right? Yeah, I felt pretty hard on this one. I was just doing a simple trick. It's always the dumb stuff. And I just remember laying there and feeling like something wasn't right. So I immediately rushed to the hospital, got my x-ray, and the doctor told me that I had broken my fibula and torn 2 ligaments, and that they were going to have to do surgery on my ankle. I was heartbroken. And not only was my heart broken, but my leg was broken too. And 2 things broken was just too much for me. And I had one of the worst weeks of my life. It ended up turning into the worst year of my life, or so I thought it would be. The recovery was more painful than I expected. It was one surgery after the next. There were so many complications. I didn't understand why things weren't just working. As soon as they said that I could start putting weight back on my foot, this is me on my rooftop in Brooklyn, they said that they were going to have to operate again and take the metal out of my leg and start the healing process all over again. It was really rough. I felt like this, just stuck, frozen in a personal and psychological winter. In other words, I was keeping it real horizontal for a while. I pretty much couldn't walk for a year, or more than a year. It was just throughout 2 years, 1 year of not walking. But luckily, my job as an artist, I can use my hands. So I was open for business. I could still work from home. I couldn't go out and paint those murals, but I could still design and create things. I also bought an iPad Pro at this time and started experimenting more with illustration. trying to channel some of these feelings of aggravation into my pieces. Just the feeling of wanting to go fast, but being stuck in a boot. The idea of being so goal-oriented that you get too focused and you lose track of everything else. The feeling of misplacing your skateboard or just poking fun at our country. This was one of my favorite drawings, the skateboard hot dog, or as I call it, the skate dog. A lot of people really gravitated towards this one, just like the Sunday Kind of Love mock-up that I had made. So I was using these illustrations as a testing ground for products that I could make. So I started making little fun products that I could mail out, these little enamel pins. I actually have some pins with me here at the conference and some drawings if you want to find me later. I don't have these skate dog pins, these are throwback. But I knew that I was starting to come out of this, what felt like a perpetual winter with these surgeries and too much laying down. And I didn't even mention, I lived in a 4th floor walk-up apartment. So I was not leaving my apartment for weeks on end sometimes. It was pretty brutal. But I could feel myself transitioning out of this winter towards a new season of creative work. And when you feel this feeling, you have to lean into it. Instead of just making one piece of artwork or one blog post, make a bunch of them because you can feel that growth, that progress starting to happen. And I learned that you can either own your story or let it own you. Because I knew this season wasn't going to be easy, but that didn't mean I wasn't going to be a victim to it. So what are you going to do with these skills and this community that you've built? At this time, I was freelancing still, but I caught the attention, especially with the skate dog, of this company called WeWork. They loved my illustration style, and they told me they wanted to put it on the walls at some of their workspaces. So this little skate dog that I had drawn on my iPad Pro while I was recovering from my broken leg ended up getting turned into a neon sign in a workspace. And I don't know about you, but I cannot walk past this neon sign without smiling. This is exactly the kind of work I wanted to do. And I didn't expect it either. When I was doing that lettering work, kind of blending into the crowd while the trend was taking off, I started to feel like, wow, I can actually be a skateboarder and also be a professional designer. I didn't know that you could do that. I thought that if you were a skateboarder in public, people wouldn't take me seriously. That's for kids, right? No, this is actually true to who I am. I'm going to be skateboarding forever. And I proved my doctor wrong, by the way. I'm back on my skateboard. I'm still eating hot dogs or veggie dogs. No, mostly skateboarding. This job that I got at WeWork, though, ended up turning into a dream opportunity. I was traveling around the country, collaborating with local artists to create installations and murals. I even got to work with all these different mediums, like floor tiles. I didn't expect I would ever see my lettering that large. They even had me painting skateboards for an installation. How good of a fit is this, right? This was a super fun season, but I could feel myself getting antsy and wanting another challenge, a little bit like that hamster wheel that we were hearing about earlier from Karen. I heard them talking about expanding the company worldwide and opening up a headquarters in Latin America. And I knew I wanted to have that Barcelona dream back in the day, but Latin America is a pretty good option as well. I had a little bit of Spanish from high school, and every time they would talk about these projects, I'd perk up. I'd say, can I help? Can I make something? And then eventually they said, we need somebody to go down there and build a team and grow a whole team of graphic designers, be the art director for the whole region. And I said, please let me do it. So they let me leave the company in New York and go work in the HQ in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And for that whole year and a half while I lived there, I was traveling all around South America and Mexico, creating these pieces of art inspired by the local culture, bringing the colors, the forms, the little idiosyncrasies that maybe you don't even know about unless you live there. We wanted all the art to feel like it was designed just for them, locally inspired, locally created, and even collaborating with some of the artists that live there. But this season was also filled with a lot of doubt and a lot of sadness too. I missed my family. I was in a long-distance relationship at the time. That's a pretty long-distance relationship too, 11 hours flight. There were some days where I just wanted to curl up in a ball and kind of just forget about all my problems. But I knew that I had to use this as a creative opportunity, so I made this drawing about it. And I didn't think much of it. It was just another page in my sketchbook, but I showed it to a few friends. I posted it online, and people really liked it. I wasn't sure why. I thought, like, compared to some of my other work, it was pretty unrefined. But my creative director at WeWork said, why don't you try this in some of the WeWork spaces? He said that I had captured something about the Latin American culture in these shapes, in this character, that felt really authentic. Maybe it was because I was visiting all these museums, now that I could walk again. And I went on kind of a rampage, just drawing this character over and over again in all these different positions and colors. Outside of WeWork, people started asking me to make murals of this character. The one on the left is actually in India at a mural festival. I didn't get to go for that one, but they painted it for me. I couldn't believe it, seriously. I started using my Instagram story in different ways to document places that I went. I think I was also just looking for a friend, too, while I was learning the language. I would say my biggest side project that year was just learning Spanish, too. This was a bit of a smaller thing that I just kept doing in my free time. But I kept exploring it, trying to mix it with my lettering and with my skateboarding passion, and just really digging into that weirdness that I had within me, and sharing my experience of Latin America through these characters. This one was a collaboration with my friend Sam from Brazil. Check out that booty, though, on the A. Yeah. And it's less about the style, because it's all about the substance over style, right? It's more about what it actually does. This guy makes me feel happy. It makes other people feel happy. And people were sharing it, so I knew I had to keep digging into this if I had that intersection. It was really hitting a sweet spot. And the murals at WeWork kept getting bigger and bigger. This one was inspired by MC Escher, one of my favorite artists. We even made some neon blobs. I really needed a win at this moment, too, because I don't know if you've ever lived abroad before, but there's a lot of things you have to get used to that are not like they are here. Eventually, I hit my stride and just felt like I was living my dream again. I was going to the skate park. This one I actually didn't get permission for. I just did it. They ended up painting over it like a week later. But the whole pinnacle of all of these projects was this one project in Mexico where they had a rooftop where they wanted to have a basketball court. And I said, basketball? Do they even play basketball in Mexico? Why don't we make it like a soccer court or a football court? And I showed them a bunch of sketches. I had all these designs. And eventually, my creative director said, no, let's use your characters on this one. So now I have a rooftop football court that featuring my blob characters for people to use at WeWork. The scale of this just was insane. In the end, they actually didn't use it that much for football because they were worried about the ball getting kicked off the roof. So they're using it for yoga and other activities like that. I was so confused why this silly little drawing made it so far. It just doesn't make sense. Maybe it's just that I kept doing these personal projects and trying to dig into who I am and embrace that more and more. And eventually, over time, the paid work starts to kind of bounce off of the personal work and create these explosions and these connections. And over time, it's just more and more. The more you walk a straight line, like Forrest Gump walking across America, at first no one cares about Forrest Gump walking across one state, but once he gets halfway across the country, everyone's like, why is he doing this? Everyone wants to know. So the more you walk this straight line, the more people are going to start to care about it. I know that's a scary thought, though, because I don't want to be just a one-dimensional person. I don't want to only draw blobs. I still like doing lettering. I still like doing all kinds of different things. But you get to choose how you present it, too. So you can have multiple different accounts, sharing one for illustration or one for blogging or blogging about one topic, and then you can have these different straight lines, just not to confuse people. So these days, I've been doing a lot of these big murals with these blobby characters because I'm having fun with it, and I kind of don't know why people like it, but I'm doing it, and it's fun. So I'm also trying to use different things as my canvas. This photo I shot with my drone in Bogota, Colombia. Actually, no, it was Medellin, and it was in a slum. You can actually do this with Google Street View as well, if you don't have a drone. But I started thinking about how can I create these larger public art pieces that can impact more people and bring people together. This isn't actually real, but maybe if I make 20 of these mock-ups, one of them will go through, and actually I can have another football court in a different country. These seeds that I'm planting, I just have to hope that one of them will grow into something in the future. So I want to end with a few last reminders. Whenever I talk to somebody who's older than me and more experienced, the biggest thing they say is just relax, enjoy it, don't get too far ahead of yourself. And the best creative opportunities I've found can come from places when you least expect it, when you get hit hard. You can't always control the circumstances, but you can control how you respond to the circumstances. If you're in a winter season, don't wish you could skip to a summer season. When things are difficult, don't wish they were easy. Don't wish for fewer problems, just wish for more skills to address those problems. And don't just wish for it, actually go for that. Plant those seeds, water them every freaking day. Thank you, guys.